Chapter 2. Get informed about finances, identify real assets, and invest in them. The fundamental trick that separates the rich from others, according to Kiyosaki, is the ability to invest in real assets rather than spending all your money on liabilities or consumer goods. When Rich Dad gathered Robert and Mike to teach them the difference between an asset and a liability, it was a turning point in their understanding of money. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket, often without requiring you to work continuously for it. For example, an apartment you rent out, stocks that pay dividends, a business that runs without your constant presence. A liability, on the other hand, is something that takes money out of your pocket. For example, if you buy a large house that costs you high monthly payments over 30 years, in addition to taxes and maintenance, you are continuously paying without receiving any concrete monthly return. And here lies the most common confusion. Many people believe that their primary residence is their greatest investment, when in fact it is not an asset generating positive cash flow. Often, it's even a drain that prevents you from investing elsewhere. Rich Dad demonstrates that if you truly want to be financially free, you must spend less than what you earn and invest the surplus in assets that generate income. Instead of spending your money on luxury cars or trendy gadgets, you buy stocks, bonds, business shares, or rental properties. Gradually, your assets grow and bring you increasing returns, forming a positive snowball effect. On the contrary, if you live above your means and accumulate debt by buying an oversized house or luxury goods, you end up with a huge liability. The result, you work essentially to pay off your debts, indirectly enriching others, banks, employers, etc. Kiyosaki often illustrates this with a cash flow diagram. The poor spend their entire salary immediately on current expenses, saving nothing. The middle class often uses their income to pay for liabilities mistaken for assets. Mortgages, car loans, student loans, credit cards. Their money primarily covers debt, which only increases if they're not careful. The rich, however, use their money to buy assets first. Their assets create a surplus of cash flow, money that regularly comes in. And with this cash flow, they can eventually afford a car or a house without jeopardizing their financial stability. He recounts a famous anecdote. He observed many of his well-paid acquaintances who, despite earning good salaries, went into debt for increasingly larger homes and brand new cars, convinced that these were the outward signs of success. Yet, these expenses kept them locked into a job just to service these debts. Meanwhile, Rich Dad only paid modest rent and reinvested every new dollar into acquisitions that brought in more than they cost. In the long run, this approach makes all the difference. Thus, for Kiyosaki, the key is being able to identify what makes money for me even when I'm not there, and channel your resources accordingly. Chapter 3. Mind your own business. Earn money for yourself, not for your employer. At this point, many readers might think, okay, but I need a salary to invest, right? And Kiyosaki answers, yes, don't necessarily quit your job overnight, but understand that your job won't make you rich. It's just a temporary means of generating money that you can then invest. He then makes a clear distinction between your profession, which you perform 40 hours a week to pay your bills, your own business, that is, the place where you invest your time and money to develop your assets. For example, Kiyosaki himself worked for major companies, Xerox, Standard Oil of California, earning a decent salary, but he kept his personal expenses low so that he could invest as much as possible. In this way, he built a healthy portfolio of income-generating assets rather than immediately expanding his lifestyle and remaining dependent on a job. Remember his anecdote about the comic book library. At age 9, he was already exploiting the idea of making others or systems work for him. He paid Mike's sister to run the library, collected the comics thrown away by a grocery store, and pocketed the difference. A small business, perhaps, but with a big lesson. Every dollar invested, every hour delegated, becomes an employee that brings in money. On the other hand, if young Robert had chosen to spend everything on candy or trinkets, he would have remained stuck in the rat race. This chapter underlines the importance of having a job to cover your expenses while never forgetting to build your own enterprise or asset empire on the side. If you don't mind your own business, in the sense of your own assets, you will spend your life enriching your employer and your creditors. The challenge, according to Kiyosaki, is to clearly distinguish. My salary is meant to invest, and my investments are meant to build freedom. Chapter 4. By understanding the tax code and the legal system, the rich stay one step ahead. Another essential point, how the rich handle taxes and the law. Kiyosaki recalls that as a child he loved Robin Hood, the hero who stole from the rich to give to the poor, but Rich Dad quickly warned him, the reality of the tax system is that it often takes from the middle class, while the rich know how to optimize and protect their assets. So, what do? They use corporations, trusts, and legal structures that allow them to pay their business expenses before being taxed, rather than being taxed on their entire income as an individual. Limit their personal liability in the event of bankruptcy or lawsuits. Take advantage of laws that allow for the deduction of certain expenses. Kiyosaki recounts that when he was a teenager, he attended Rich Dad's meetings with lawyers and accountants. They explained how to invest in the name of a corporation, how to legally deduct certain business-related expenses, and only pay taxes on what remained. Meanwhile, Poor Dad ended up being taxed directly on his salary, leaving him with only a remainder to cover everything else. The idea is not to say that the system is unfair, but rather that most people do not have the knowledge to use it to their advantage. The rich often have specialized advisors and understand the tax code. For example, knowing that a corporation can expense certain professional fees before tax, whereas an individual cannot. This is how they win the game from the outset, while the middle class bears the brunt of withholding taxes without ever challenging it. Chapter 5. Most of us do not benefit from a financial education. Why this knowledge gap? Because, as Kiyosaki points out, schools do not teach us how to get rich. We learn advanced mathematics, literature, history, but little is taught about budgeting, money management, passive income, investing, or taxation. Teachers themselves often haven't received training in these areas, and the traditional school system prepares us more to be employees than investors. In the story of Robert and Mike, it is evident. While their classmates were studying academic subjects, they were attending Rich Dad's meetings, learning negotiation, accounting, and how to spot opportunities, like collecting old comic books to turn into a business. As a result, the two boys quickly became outliers among their peers because they saw money and opportunities where others saw only boredom or impossibility. Kiyosaki laments that many young people receive a credit card before even knowing how to manage a budget. He also observes that many highly educated adults fall into the trap of credit card debt, fail to save for retirement, and find themselves in trouble at the slightest crisis. In fact, 50% of Americans have no solid retirement plan, and among those who do, many do not contribute enough. This speaks volumes about the lack in our educational system regarding financial literacy. The solution? Self-education, read books, attend seminars, meet people who have already invested and know how to do it. Poor Dad represented academic excellence but had no idea how to make money grow. Rich Dad, on the other hand, was less academically inclined but taught himself by asking questions, experimenting and taking risks, and he held the key to financial freedom. Chapter 6. Obtain a financial education in 3 steps. Evaluate, set goals, build your intelligence. Kiyosaki proposes a mini action plan for anyone who wants to educate themselves financially. Evaluate your current situation. Take an honest look at your finances. How much do you earn? What are your expenses and debts? No self-deception. If you dream of a fancy car but don't even have an emergency fund, there's a significant gap to close. Set your goals. For example, you might decide to save a specific amount to buy a small rental apartment within 3 years, or cut your expenses to the bare minimum until you have enough capital to invest. The idea is to transform your vague dream into a concrete plan. Build your financial intelligence. Read books on real estate, stocks, and taxes, attend seminars, and talk to entrepreneurs and investors. Don't remain in ignorance. The more you learn about negotiation, spotting undervalued markets, or understanding taxation, the faster you can progress. An often cited anecdote is that of Kiyosaki's wife, Kim, who desired a nice Mercedes. Instead of taking a standard car loan, she patiently invested in real estate until the rental income could fully cover the cost of the car. In other words, she let her assets pay for her pleasures. Had she bought the car on credit from the start, she would have tied up money without any return and deprived herself of part of her investment capacity. Thus, this chapter shows that anyone can begin the journey toward wealth, but the sooner you start, the better. If you're 20 years old, you have more room to take risks and capitalize on gains. If you're 40 or 50, it's never too late, though you might need to work harder and be more disciplined to catch up. Chapter 7. Financial Intelligence and Courage. Allow the rich to invent money in any situation. Here is a crucial point. Kiyosaki emphasizes that in the real world, it isn't necessarily the brightest academically who succeed, but those who know how to spot and seize opportunities, which requires audacity. You might be highly educated and understand the theory of investing perfectly, but if the fear of loss, judgment, or failure paralyzes you, you will never act. Rich Dad illustrates this with the example of several real estate acquisitions he made when everyone else was fleeing a market considered risky, while others shouted, "What a bargain!" Kiyosaki explains that it was simply his financial knowledge, knowing how to recognize the potential of a property, and guts, daring to make an offer, taking on a loan, etc. If he had been guided by fear, nothing would have happened and he wouldn't have profited. The lesson: financial intelligence plus courage allow you to create money almost out of nothing. You find a gap, a need, or an underexploited market, and you provide the solution. The timid will remain spectators, preferring safety. The bold, if they have the knowledge to limit risks, will reap the rewards. Chapter 8. Instead of playing it safe, try investing your money in stocks, bonds, or tax-advantaged certificates. When overwhelmed by fear or excessive caution, you often leave all your money in a savings or checking account that yields almost nothing. Kiyosaki tells us that if you want to achieve financial freedom one day, you must consider riskier investments than the mere 0.2% annual return. Why? Because time flies and inflation or unexpected expenses will erode your savings if they do not produce a return. He mentions several possibilities. Stocks, which can rise quickly but require a good understanding of the market to avoid losing everything in speculations. Bonds, which are more stable but sometimes less lucrative. Tax-advantaged certificates in the United States, which can yield between 8% and 30% according to Kiyosaki, but require a solid understanding of the tax system. Real estate, a tangible classic that generally offers stability, though it demands management and vigilance, maintenance, tenants, repairs, etc. Even though there is a risk, leaving your money completely safe means you'll never achieve high returns. Of course, Kiyosaki does not advocate reckless speculation. He stresses the importance of knowledge. Study the market, evaluate its potential, and then decide. But avoiding all risk also means missing out on the greatest opportunities. Chapter 9. Don't work just to earn money. Working to learn is much more important. Finally, Kiyosaki explains a concept that might seem counterintuitive. Don't just look for the highest paying job, but the one that teaches you the most. Why? Because true wealth comes from the array of skills you develop. The more fields you master, sales, marketing, management, taxation, accounting, negotiation, leadership, the more value you can create on a large scale. He recounts how, after obtaining his university degree, he landed a well-paid job. His poor dad was proud, considering it the royal road. But Robert chose to quit after 6 months to join the Marines, learn to fly, and develop his leadership and discipline. Rich Dad congratulated him. You are accumulating a wide range of skills, you're not specializing too early, and you're preparing yourself to see the world from multiple perspectives. In the academic world, specialization is often celebrated. One might think, the more of an expert I become in one field, the better. Kiyosaki nuances this by noting that while specialization can lead to a comfortable salary, it does not necessarily lead to financial independence. For example, doctors earn well but are extremely dependent on their practice. If they stop, the income stops. The rich, however, own assets. Even if they take a vacation or change their life path, money continues to flow in. That is why he encourages everyone to work to learn, accumulate diverse experiences in different departments, roles, and sectors to gain the broad skill set that will later allow you to create or invest in different projects. Do not remain trapped with just one degree and one career. Conclusion, final summary. We have covered 9 key chapters of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The rich don't work for money. Get out of the rat race and stop exhausting yourself for just a monthly paycheck. Identify assets and invest in them. Look for what puts money in your pocket and avoid liabilities. Mind your own business. Your job pays your bills. Your investments build your wealth. Master the tax system. The rich use corporations and legal loopholes to reduce their taxes, something the middle class often overlooks. Financial education is lacking. Educate yourself because school won't do it for you. Evaluate, set goals, and build your intelligence. Analyze your situation, establish concrete goals, and cultivate your financial acumen. Courage plus knowledge equals inventing money. Fear paralyzes, while boldness, when informed, brings rewards. Don't play 100% it safe. A measured risk is often necessary to achieve better returns. Work to learn, not just for a paycheck. Accumulate a wide range of skills so that you're not stuck in one specialization. Memorable anecdotes: Robert, at 9 years old, trying to make coins by melting toothpaste tubes, then repurposing unsold comic books into a small business. Kiyosaki's wife, Kim, who waited until her real estate investments could pay for the Mercedes of her dreams. Poor Dad, despite his academic credentials, remaining a simple employee, while Rich Dad, less formally educated, built a commercial empire by understanding the dynamics of money. Conclusion, it's up to you to decide whose dad you want to follow. If you choose the path of the rich dad, you will have to rethink your attitude toward work and security. Identify real assets. Accept the idea that money should work for you, not the other way around. Be willing to break some societal dogmas. A stable job is the ultimate goal in order to build your financial independence. If you take up this challenge, you will see that your perspective on money and security will change completely. So, are you ready to break away from the rat race? Perhaps by cutting unnecessary expenses, reading more about investing, or starting a small side business. Rich Dad, Poor Dad calls on you to break with the tradition of relying on a single salary and to take control of your financial destiny. Follow me for more summary business.